Welcome to the Legally Ever After Real Estate Podcast, where we help you build, protect, and pass on your assets. I'm your host, estate planning attorney, Pamela Moss-Garrett. Let's get started. All right, today we have Raina Bayas from the Bayas Firm. She is going to be talking to us about the BRRRR method. Welcome, Raina.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm excited you're here. So kind of tell us, how did you get started investing in real estate?
Okay, so I come from a pretty real estate family, right? So my mom is a real estate agent. My dad is now a real estate agent. My husband works in real estate. So I just had a lot of real estate around me this entire time. But I never really participated in real estate at all. But I always knew, and my husband and I always knew that this was going to be kind of what we left our kids. Like this was really going to be how we were going to generate wealth. And it wasn't going to be through just our W-2s, that we really wanted to invest in real estate. And there's something about, owning like an asset that's real, right? As opposed to the stock market where sometimes it just feels really removed. And so we were thinking, back in 2014, like, let's invest in real estate. Let's try to do this. We live in Denver, Colorado. We had no money. And so we started looking for real estate to invest in. And it turns out that you actually do need a lot of money in Denver to invest. So we were like, okay, let's put it on pause and try to figure out how we can get this money. So meanwhile, I live in Denver, I'm commuting to Boulder. And that commute could be like an hour and a half each way. I mean, it's like ridiculous, especially before they built that nice new freeway. And I would listen to Bigger Pockets, which is another podcast. And it's so educational and it was so interesting. And it had these great inspirational stories. And so I am just listening and just taking in information on real estate, how to create a portfolio, the different strategies that we can use. Every day I'm listening. And finally, the market was such that we were able to refinance our house and actually take some money out. And so, 4 years later, we're finally at the point where we can take some money out. And so we were able to take out about $160,000 out of our house, which honestly, when I say this out loud, feels, especially in Denver, literally like nothing. It feels like not even enough for a down payment. But that was all we had, And so we finally got, when we closed on our cash out refi, we're like, what do we do with this? And that's when all of that information, all of that education and information gathering kind of melded with the ability to do it. And so we started investing.
And, how did you decide that which strategy you wanted to start with first? Because there's so many strategies I know you had looked at and you thought about. What made you decide on kind of the first initial strategy, and what strategy did you take?
So my husband, what he does in real estate is he buys apartment buildings for his company and they renovate it. And so it's called value add, right? They renovate it, they push up the rents, and then they're able to sell it for a lot more. And so we always knew that this value add strategy was what we wanted to do. We wanted to buy something that needed to be rehabbed and, maybe a little bit, maybe just cosmetic, or maybe even a little bit more than that, and be able to sell it and make money off of it. So that was kind of how we started down the path. But right around this time, so this is, 2018, 2019, interest rates are kind of falling. And we start reading, actually, Bigger Pockets. David Green wrote this book called BRRRR. It's buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat is basically, so it's BRRRR. There's like a million R's. So we start reading this book and we realize that we only have $160,000. So that's going to buy us almost nothing. But if we do this method, if we refi out of every single house that we buy and try to get cash out, we can recycle the cash and continue to use it for other purchases and really create some velocity with our money. And so that's when we decided, okay, let's just try to do this BRRRR method. I remember when my husband told me about it, and I was reading about it, I was like, there's no way. It felt so impossible, like a unicorn. like there would only be one BRRRR house ever that you could ever do. But turns out you can actually do it. It just takes a little bit more effort than just run of the mill buying a house and renting it out.
All right, great. So where did you go to invest? What did you do with that first 160,000?
Okay, so that huge pot of money, we were like, should we sell it all and move to Mexico? We said, no, okay. We're gonna take this pot and we're gonna invest. And so we started looking back in Denver. We get a real estate agent, we're looking in Denver, and we realize that we cannot afford anything still in Denver because meanwhile the prices have all gone up. So really, I mean, even if you wanted to do a basic flip in Denver, you needed to come with $400,000 in cash. And this was back in 2018. So we were like, I was getting really frustrated. And so I read another book called Long Distance Real Estate Investing. It's by the same David Green, Bigger Pockets. It just has such a wealth of information. The entire website does. But so I read this book and he made it seem really possible, right? To actually invest out of state. Every single person, my whole family, my husband's family, they would tell us, do not invest out of state. You don't want to do that. You don't know the market. You're not there. Anything can happen, right? And we'd heard that for our whole lives. But after reading this book, and David Green really talks about a team, right? Like creating this rock star team. And now that I've done it for a long time, I realize that you have to do that. But creating this rock star team, you can do it. So we started looking outside of Denver, outside of Colorado, actually completely outside of Colorado, because really we couldn't afford anything in Colorado. So we knew we wanted to be in the Sun Belt because that was where the trajectory of population was moving to. So, somewhere down in the bottom part of the country. And I started looking at Charleston and, Georgia, Atlanta, all these different places that were just hot topics, right? Like everybody's talking about them. And I realized you can't really compete as a new person going into a new market that is very popular, Nashville, whatever. You cannot compete because there's already people there. It's already saturated with real estate investors and investors that have been there for a long time that have already established relationships. And so it's just a much harder sort of market to get into. So I said, okay, forget about all these other markets. We don't need to go to where everyone's talking about going. Let's go somewhere close by to some of these places that are really popular. And we looked at Memphis. And there were a lot of really good things about Memphis that we liked. One being the rent to value ratio was about 1%. So basically your rents were higher. So your rent is 1% of the value of the house. And if you look at that, it's a very generic rule, but if you look at that, most likely you're going to cash flow on that house. Memphis is hard, right? It's very blue collar. They're going through a lot of things, especially right now. There's a lot of crime there, and there's a lot of poverty there, and that means that people can't afford housing. They can't afford to buy their own house. But so the rents are pretty high versus actually buying a house. The mortgage is going to be really low, and so we decided let's start there, and that's when we put together our team out there.
Oh, great. How did you go about finding the right team?
So that was definitely trial and error. So we, the first thing that we did was looked at the most popular real estate agent that was in Memphis. We were like, well, who has the most listings and whatever. And this guy, Tyler Tapley, stood out. And he was doing exactly what we wanted to do, which was he was selling to out-of-state investors. It wasn't one of those things where he was making money off of it. It wasn't like he was getting these and then selling it at a higher price. He was just a straight real estate agent. He just had tons of contacts in very depressed neighborhoods in Memphis. And so we called him up, and he is an animal. He's an animal. He doesn't put us on the regular list where we get all these listings and yada, yada. He's like, look, I'm going to be very focused on what you're going to buy. And so he would send us probably 4 or 5 emails every day. And of specific houses that he had picked out. I mean, I don't think this guy sleeps, right? Because he has like tons of investors all over. I don't know how he does it. So he starts sending us these houses, and I am doing numbers over and over. I mean, every day. It's almost like a full-time job, right? And I had my full-time job, and then I would come home and do all these numbers. And I was like, this guy is keeping me busy. And I knew with his level of knowledge and his own motivation, I knew we were going to buy a house in Memphis. There was no question about it. So we had our real estate agent. He's a rock star. We felt good about it. He knew how to deal with out-of-state investors. He would go video everything and send us the videos of everything, and pointed out stuff, told us about the area. And then because we were buying houses to rehab, we then also needed a contractor. And so that actually took a little bit of time to figure out. And the first two contractors, one of them, horror story, but not too bad, but, we would give him, he would go to Home Depot and we would pay for the things that he would buy. And it turns out that he was actually buying stuff for not just our house, but other stuff that he was working on as well. So, but we didn't know that until later. And he did a terrible job. Another woman, she told us it was going to take her 2 months, and it ended up taking her a year to finish something. So, it was just like trial and error. But then as soon as we found the contractor that actually met their deadlines and came on budget, it was gangbusters. I mean, with Tyler and then our contractors, it was just, we were able to buy whatever we wanted to, and we knew that it was going to be able to pan out. Yeah.
And then you worked with a lender. So your team was a real estate agent, and then you said a contractor. Who else is on your team?
Right. And then you always want to have a lender kind of in the back pocket. So we went with a lender who understood BRRRR and who understood how to kind of work the deal so that we can actually get the cash out refi in less than the 6-month waiting period that you were supposed to get. And there's a couple of ways to do that. They get a little bit complicated, but so we found a lender who specializes in BRRRR. So we had that guy. And then property management, because you're not there. So you need a really, really good property management team, somebody that's going to go out and make sure that they are taking care of the houses and that kind of stuff. And so those were our 4 people. And we were able to do a lot of business with those 4. And then with the lender, after we did a couple deals in Memphis, we actually found a local lender who gave us a pretty large line of credit. And that opened up a lot of possibility for us as well. So we were then buying houses and we could close very quickly, right? Because we already had the cash ready to go with these. So that was helpful.
Was the lender you worked with someone local who originally that understood the BRRRR, or was it someone out here that understand that method, or like a national person?
It was a national person. It was Security National Mortgage Company, and he appears a lot on different podcasts, and he understands BRRRR. He works with a lot of investors. And so he's basically out of Arizona, but he is licensed in Tennessee, just a bunch of the hot spots, right? So we first worked with him. The second lender did not know about BRRRR, but she was local. She wouldn't have given us any money. She wouldn't have lent us money. We had to show her that we were in Memphis. We had done business in Memphis. We had contacts in Memphis. And then she was able to give us this line of credit through the local company with the low interest rate that has helped us do finance, flips and BRRRRs and everything. So that was
amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of to like unpack a little bit more of the BRRRR method and kind of how you used it. Are there kind of any examples or tips that you want to share?
Yeah. Okay. So the BRRRR method, the way that it works is you have to create equity in the house, right? So it's not like you're going out and buying a house that's at market rate. And it's not like you're going out and buying a house that, if you put $25,000 in, it's going to be at market rate, at $25,000 more. Like you really have to create some sort of equity. That was why I thought that it was such a uniform. So for example, you want to buy, a house, let's say it's $50,000. Okay. And you buy this house at $50,000 that's distressed inside. So maybe the plumbing is off, or, It just cosmetically, it's not looking good. The roof needs fixing. I mean, all the big systems need fixing. But in that area, so like literally the house next door, if it was done up right, those houses are worth $100,000. And so you already have that, let's say $50,000 spread. Now, you know that you're going to go in and put work in it, right? And you can't put $50,000 in it because that would just get you back up to a $100,000 house. You need to put, let's say, $25,000 in it, right? So that you create that $25,000 in equity. Okay. That's important because lenders will lend 75% of the appraised value of the house. So if you spend 50 and you put in 25,000 and the house appraises at 100,000, the lender is going to lend you $75,000, which means you go to the closing table, the lender is basically giving you back the money that you just put into that house. So you've created that equity and that just sits in the house, but you've gotten all the cash that you use back. Now you can take that $75,000 and go buy another house and another house, and you just keep doing that. So that would be a perfect BRRRR, is basically what it's called. It's harder now because the interest rates are so much higher. So it's just harder. But back in 2019, 2020, 2021, you were getting those perfect BRRRRs. And so we had some really good success with that. Now, if you leave $10,000 to $15,000, in the house, you might not get the full $75,000 back, let's say. But as long as you're doing it right, you can still BRRRR, you can still get out a significant chunk of your cash that you put in, right? And then now you own a house and you've only put in really $10,000 to $15,000 in cash, of your own cash. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Are you ever doing like hard money loans, like the quicker turnaround loans for the lower interest rate, or are you doing like conventional?
So we used our line of credit to buy, to buy those homes. Or we would use our cash to buy those homes. I interviewed a couple of different hard money lenders. Just with our line of credit, it didn't make sense for us to go with hard money lending because you were paying a lot of origination fees. And we didn't have to do that with the line of credit. We never had to pay the origination fees. So.
And then you're keeping the houses and cash flowing them.
Right. And so once we refi out of them, well, actually before we refi out of them, as soon as they're done with the rehab, we then rent it out, and the rent should, cover the mortgage plus the insurance, plus the taxes, plus any maintenance, et cetera. And then we should be able to cash flow above that. And so that's what we have been doing. So we rent out all the homes. We have done a couple flips, but the BRRRR method is renting it out. And so
how many homes do you guys have currently in your portfolio?
So units, we have, I just counted it right before this podcast to make sure, we have 22 units. Yeah.
Since 2019. Since
2019. But one of them is an 8-unit apartment building. So that kind of counts for a lot, but yeah.
And then why does the BRRRR method, why does renting it out make sense versus just selling it?
So, the whole purpose of real estate is to kind of have just this passive asset. And once you sell the asset, you're selling the golden goose, right? Like you want to get the eggs, the little golden eggs, and you still have the goose that's continually giving you the eggs. And at the end, maybe you do sell it, but after you've gotten all of your eggs out that you want to get. That's kind of just how I look at it. By doing a flip, sure, you're capitalizing on the equity that you can make right now, but then that's it. That's all you have, right? So you really want I really like having this sort of long-term asset that grows and appreciates while I'm also getting rents from it. There's also like tax, right? So if you do flips, you're paying a much higher tax than you would if you actually held a house for a year or longer. So it has to do with capital gains. Now I'm forgetting. Short-term and long, there we go, short-term and long-term capital gains. And so the short-term gains are going to be taxed at a much higher rate. But we did flip some of them.
Were you able to depreciate some of these assets to offset your W-2 income?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's really, and then, did you kind of hold back a certain amount of reserves for maintenance and other issues with the potentially with the properties?
Yes. And so the way that we do our maintenance numbers, so real estate is all about the numbers. When you take emotion out of it, I know a lot of people sometimes are like, oh, you get to decorate this house, you get to do all this. For me, it is not about that at all. First of all, I'm a terrible decorator, so that's probably why. But anyways, it like freaks me out to try to decorate something. So for me, it's all about the numbers. And so when we're doing the numbers, we are being very careful because you really got to watch out for maintenance. So when we do the numbers, we always put like a 5 to 10%, something in there every month for maintenance. So we make sure that we cover that. We always watch out for taxes. So really with taxes, you really have to watch out, especially in a very rapidly appreciating market. A lot of people will buy a house looking at the current tax bill, not realizing that next year when it hits that you bought this house for $20,000 more than what it is appraised at for the tax assessor, that they are going to be raising your taxes. And that can have a significant impact on your cash flow to the point where you might not even get a cash flow. So you always have to be very cognizant of taxes. So when we do our paperwork, or not paperwork, but when we do our analysis, we are very cognizant, making sure that we have enough for maintenance, et cetera. And we don't spend all of the money that comes in every month, right? Like it just sits in, we have a separate bank account. It sits in that bank account. We might take it out to do certain things. Let's say we go on vacation or whatever, but we actually leave a huge chunk of money in there for anything that comes up. For example, one of our houses, we had to fix the main line, the sewer main line. And that's like $5,000. So, that's a significant amount of money. And luckily or not luckily, but we planned it so that we had it in there.
That's great. Did you eventually expand outside of Memphis?
We tried, yes. So this is why a team is so important. I call it the tale of two cities. Memphis, we rock, right? I tried to go into Birmingham. I was like, I can do the same thing in Birmingham. I really like Birmingham. It's a cute town and it has a lot of the same kind of qualities, right? The rent to value ratio was at 1%. So I thought that we could cash flow. The rents were relatively high. So I go in there and we do the same exact thing. We meet the real estate agent who deals with investors. Everything is going well. We buy a house out there. We BRRRR it. It's a perfect BRRRR. Our property management sucked. It was terrible. And the contractor was horrible and put in brown carpeting with yellow walls. We couldn't rent it out. And a lot of it's my fault, right? Like I wasn't overseeing this contractor like I should have been, honestly. And it's because I had such good success in Memphis that you kind of get lulled into this, this is just the same thing. It's not. You really have to, watch it. So yeah, the property management was terrible. We couldn't rent it out. We finally got a renter. They put a pole in the basement that busted up the ceiling, and we ended up having to redo the entire house. We couldn't get it rented again. We were losing money every week or every month, and we ended up selling the house. We still made money off of it, and that's really due to the market. And, we were kind of saved by the market. I never liked to be saved by a market, but we kind of were at that time. But yeah, we just didn't have a good team. And so now we're out. We sold our assets in Birmingham, and I'm never going back.
So right now your assets are in Memphis.
Assets are in Memphis. I have one condo in Texas, in the Woodlands, which is where my parents live. So
are you scoping out any other future? Like, is there any coming next after?
Yeah. So, for a little while, we weren't. I mean, it was really slow because the prices had just appreciated so much that we were having a really hard time finding any deals. And now, as the market kind of is slowing down and it's affecting Denver a little bit, but it's really affecting other places. And so Memphis, a lot of the investors who bought, towards the end of 2022 are having a little bit of trouble getting their houses off. And so they're kind of selling it at a lower price. So we're still looking. What I really want to do is kind of get into maybe doing an office building, either here or somewhere else. Yeah, so still exploring, but we've really slowed down on purchasing right now.
What are the kind of pros and cons of the BRRRR method that you've come across?
So the pro is the velocity of your money. I mean, you can exponentially increase your asset base just using the BRRRR method, right? Because you're recycling all of the money. And the idea is, as the rents go up, your monthly income goes up. As real estate appreciates, your portfolio is appreciating as well. So that all is good. However, the con is when you're taking money out of a house like that, your monthly cash flow is low. A good BRRRR with the monthly cash flow, minus, taking out maintenance and property management fees, is about $100. That's like a good BRRRR. So you're not exactly retiring, on the beach. I keep talking about on the beach in Mexico. I think I really need to go to Mexico and go to the beach. It's like too cold here. But you're not like retiring off of this cash flow, unless you have a ton of houses. And you're leveraged. You're leveraged to the hilt. Like, we have a lot of loans on our property. Luckily, because we are conservative, all of our loans are 25% less than, the value. So it's not like, so let's say the property value went down 25%. That would be an incredible drop, right? So at least we can still sell it now and still make, pay off the loan. We're not in that type of dire situation, but there are people who did the BRRRR method and they are in that situation where now their loans are more than their house is worth. So we're kind of like 19, so what was it? 2008. There we go. Sorry. 2008, where that's kind of happening, right? So you're leveraged. And as we try to buy our own personal property, we want to buy a bigger house. Our kids are getting older and it's really hard to get approved for loans because lenders are looking at the amount of leverage that we have and they're not taking the 100% of the rent that we are getting. They're taking 75%, sometimes 50%. We have to show them that we've had this renter for a long time. We're showing them all of these different leases. And so they're still looking at it as against our bottom line, right? The money that we bring in, even though our rents are covering the mortgage by a considerable amount. So, it's harder to get approved.
Does kind of this method, does the BRRRR method still work right now with where interest rates are, with where we are with the economy?
Yes, it will still work, but you have to be very careful on the buy. I mean, that's where you make your money. Everybody says that, and I believe it 100%. You make your money where you buy, or at the price that you buy it. And so you really need to buy some depressed homes. You're not going to go out and look at 2022 prices and think that you're going to be able to BRRRR this thing. You're probably not. You need to lowball people and get them back to reality, or maybe before, 2019, 2020 prices in order to make it work.
So you need to be looking at houses that are more fixer-uppers and are more depressed areas, it sounds like.
Potentially more fixer-uppers, potentially more depressed areas, but what you really need to do, honestly, I would say you need to find the depressed buyer. The depressed seller. You need to find the depressed seller, not necessarily the depressed house, because labor has gone up considerably as well. So even if you buy a house that needs more work, you're still paying a lot in labor. So
it's more of like the really motivated seller
that
really wants to get out quickly.
Yes. That's your sweet spot. Like the person who bought in 2022 and needs to get out of this house because they cannot renovate it because they're realizing it doesn't work. And so they're willing to sell it maybe at a loss so that they don't have to put in additional money and take it at an even bigger loss later. So that's kind of the people that you're targeting. Or, you're targeting people who are getting divorced and just need to get rid of their property. You're targeting maybe people who don't want people walking through their house and actually putting it on the market. You're still targeting those types of people. So I think you got to go more so with those types of people.
This is super helpful and very inspiring to hear how much you've been able to accomplish in such a quick amount of time. And a lot of it's self-taught, and learning from books. That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what you do at your law firm specifically?
Yeah. So I started my law firm about 6 months ago. We had kind of slowed down on real estate, and I actually really missed being a lawyer, which is, I think, sounds a little bit crazy, but it's true. So I started working on lemon law cases, so car warranty cases, auto fraud cases, auto financing fraud. So consumer focused and just really trying to help people out of bad car situations,
And is
basically.
that here in Colorado?
Yeah, so it is so my office is located in Denver, but I serve people all over Colorado.
And what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, they can check out my website. It's the Bayas, BAYAS firm.com. And they can also call the main line, which is 720-552-6062, and set up an initial consultation. It's free. And I just love speaking to consumers. And, if we can't represent you, I'll try to find you resources and whoever can. So.
And then my final question that I ask everybody on the podcast is, what is your legacy? What is the legacy you're building?
So, it's so interesting that you say that. I have an affirmation that I say every day, and my legacy is really giving my children the ability to make decisions from a place of strong self-worth is what I'd like to leave.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This was so helpful, so inspiring. I just really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
If you need an updated will, trust, or estate plan, and you are a Colorado resident, we would love to be your estate planning law firm. Give us a call at 720-706-0036 to schedule your complimentary 15-minute call. You can also directly schedule at lawmother.com/go. If you liked this episode and you want to learn more, you should definitely check out my international best-selling book, Legally Ever After. It's available on Amazon as both an ebook, a paperback, and an audio version. And if you'd like a free chapter, head over to lawmother.com/LEA.